All right, welcome back. So today's topic is one that is going to help you be a better coach and practitioner in every single one of your sessions and groups. This is how powerful what we're going to be looking at today is. It impacts how you listen to your clients, how you ask questions, how you create awareness, how you strategize, and so much more. What we're looking at today is really a game-changing, transformational principle and skill. And it's one that's going to allow you to go much deeper with your clients for more results, for more change, for more embodiment of all that comes through the work that you do together. And what we're talking about today is activating what I call the 4 levels of learning and processing when you're working with your clients. If you're not aware of the 4 levels and also what types of coaching questions and reflections and processes can activate each of the 4 levels, it's likely that you're feeling as if your client sessions are either just scratching the surface instead of going deep, or that your clients aren't fully connecting in with their inner wisdom to find new solutions. If you're not activating the 4 levels of learning and processing, you might be having trouble navigating emotion that's just under the surface for your clients and getting in their way of being fully present or fully seeing their situations, and so much more. Activating the 4 levels of learning and processing is so important that my Sacred Depths graduates have heard me teach it, mention it, and suss out the many details and applications of it probably dozens of times. And I'm going to give you today an introduction to these 4 levels. And I'm so excited to get you started on this. Or if you've heard this from me before, for you to go deeper with all of this. So let's begin here. And I'm actually going to jump straight into the first level of learning and processing. And as I describe it, I think that the importance of the fuller model is already going to start to come into focus. So the first level of learning and processing that we want to activate when we're working with our clients and when we're working with our groups is the cognitive level. So what does that mean? In our one-on-one and group sessions, we want to activate our clients' cognitive level of learning and processing because this allows our clients to cognitively or intellectually, right, with their minds, mentally, perceive new ideas, new awarenesses, new visions, etc. In order for a human being to truly change and grow or make progress towards a goal, they usually need to intellectually understand the goal or the action steps involved or the blocks or obstacles that are in their way of the goals. They need to cognitively or intellectually understand habits or patterns that might be self-sabotaging or fears, right, etc. So hopefully that's pretty clear. We want our clients to be able to connect the dots on things, to understand things, to perceive things on the mental or cognitive level. And of course, we're activating our clients' cognitive level of learning and processing anytime we ask them a question about what they think or what they know or what they understand or what their ideas are about something, etc. We also activate the cognitive level of learning and processing anytime we are presenting information, right? So if we have a group, or even with a client in a way, if we are consulting with that client or if we are presenting information to a group, you can think about kind of traditional speaking, right? Giving a talk that can activate the cognitive level. Anytime we ask clients or groups to make a list of something, a list of things that you don't want to tolerate anymore, a list of hopes and dreams, a list of fears about a particular situation, a list of action steps, right? On and on and on. Anytime we ask a client or a group to make a list, we are activating the cognitive level of learning and processing. I'll give you a couple more examples of this. Anytime we lead a brainstorming exercise or a mind mapping exercise, that's also an example of activating the cognitive level of learning and processing. There are so many more ways, but hopefully this is getting you thinking. It's cognitively getting you thinking about this level. Because I'm not only a coaching nerd and a transformation nerd, but I'm also a nerd when it comes to the seasons and the elements. I'll share that I see the cognitive or mental level of learning and processing as related to the element of air. The element of air is often associated with verbal communication, with writing, with sharing of ideas, with dialogue, etc. And I won't get too deeply into this here today, but it is important to at least mention that another vital use of activating that cognitive level is when in any given session, if your client has kind of moved or leaned to in an extreme way to the element of water, then you want to bring in the air. You want to activate the cognitive. So in other words, if a client's emotions are overwhelming them or confusing them, if they've just become overwhelmed with emotion in a way that is not helpful for them in the session, then sometimes in those cases, bringing in the cognitive, activating the cognitive can be very, very useful. Now, the way that most coaching and quite honestly, a lot of other modalities have been traditionally taught is that it relies almost exclusively on the mind, right? On the cognitive level of learning and processing, on intellectual understanding. And that's how I was first trained. In my first training, which was excellent, we really focused only on the cognitive, or mostly on the cognitive. And cognitive awareness is obviously so important, right? We just established that. But here's the thing. We can't rely only on cognitive understanding. We can't rely only on activating that mental level of learning and processing. True human transformation and progress can very rarely be achieved through cognitive understanding alone, right? If it could be achieved through cognitive understanding alone, then we could just read an article on the internet, for example, and then we would, take action and get the job done. But that rarely happens. We need to activate other levels of learning and processing, and we really want to bring other levels of learning and processing into our work with our clients. So let's take a look at those other levels. That brings us to what I call the heart level of learning and processing. Now, when you don't activate the heart level of learning and processing, your clients or your students haven't really been given the opportunity to connect in with their emotions. And our emotions, when connected in with in aligned ways, can often, in very useful ways, help inform what we want or help inform how we truly desire to move forward on a goal, or help us really get in touch with why we're feeling the way that we feel. Activating the heart level is about supporting our clients to become aware of how their heart feels about any given situation. And that's so important, right? We've all probably made decisions from the cognitive level only, right? From the place of, this is a smart idea, this is the obvious next step. But sometimes, and check to see if you know this for yourself, sometimes just because it's a smart idea doesn't mean it's the right idea for us, right? It doesn't mean that it's going to be the most satisfying thing or the thing that nourishes us the most or the thing that is really, really aligned for us. We need some input from our hearts, right? And as I say this, it makes me think of, some of you might know, I have been married to John now, for over 17 years. And when I made the decision to marry him, if I would have made the decision just from my intellect, only on paper, I am positive he would not have been the best choice from cognitive understanding alone, right? My heart needed to inform that decision as well. Same with almost every decision I've made in my career and in my business. And I bet you have your own stories on this too. And so our clients need this as well, right? They need information from their hearts on their goals, on their plans, on their strategies, on their blocks, on their tough situations. When we are able to activate that heart level of learning and processing in our client work, it's also about holding masterful space for our clients in appropriate moments to feel into the emotions that might be coming up for them in that moment, right? Emotions like anger or grief or joy or jealousy or love, etc. Activating the heart level of learning and processing gives clients an opportunity to really get in touch with those emotions, which we need more of in this society. We're so used to not paying enough attention in aligned ways and intentional ways to our emotions, right? So activating that heart level sometimes can look like holding the space for our clients to connect in empowered ways to their emotions, as well as then for our clients to gain a better understanding of how those emotions are impacting their goals. And also, when we can do this, it allows us to support our clients to use their emotions in more helpful ways. And I'll give you a quick example of this. I was recently working with a client who has a lot of, we can call them tensions and problems and issues with her sister. And this client of mine has a lifelong pattern of overgiving to her sister, who kind of mistreats her. And then the overgiving ends up depleting my client. And she doesn't feel good about it. And in a recent session, she brought this up, and I could see that there was an emotion underneath all of this that my client hadn't really been willing to even see for herself, let alone process. And so I held the space and asked the questions and made the reflections and really was right there with her so that my client could finally connect in with all of the anger that she also held towards her sister. Decades worth of anger that my client had never wanted to see or acknowledge because of all of the love that she holds for her sister. And just the being able to feel into that emotion and to be with it, and then to gain a better understanding of the anger and how it's been, by not connecting in with it, how it's been depleting my client. It opened up so much for my client, right? She didn't then go and rage at her sister or anything like that, but it has helped my client since then to make so much better decisions about what time and energy she does and does not give to her sister, and how to set better boundaries. So that's just one example. And of course, a side note on this, it goes without saying that you should always work within your scope as a practitioner when it comes to holding space for emotion and leaning into emotion. I train my students on how to do this in a lot of different scenarios, but of course, there are some situations that are out of the scope of coaching, and you want to know those and recognize those. All right. Couple other things on the heart level before we move on. The heart level of learning and processing is really vital because it can help clients access the passion that they have in their hearts for certain goals or actions or initiatives or next steps. It's hard to follow through on goals or action steps if you haven't accessed the passion in your heart, right? So no matter how wonderful or smart or reasonable an idea might sound in a cognitive way, if it's something new, if it's something that stretches you, if it's something that's challenging, you need to pair it with passion, right? The passion is part of what can fuel the action. That passion comes from our hearts and not from our brains. So activating the heart level of learning and processing can look in a client session or a group session in so many different ways, depending on the client or the particular situation. In Sacred Depths, we always say, always coach the what based on the who. So every scenario, is going to have its own best way to activate the heart level. But to get you started in a very simple way, think about sometimes asking feeling questions or heart questions to your clients. So, for example, how do you feel about that situation versus what do you think about that situation? Or what does your heart want you to know about having that conversation with your boss? Okay, let's move on to what I call the spirit level of learning and processing. Now, this is important. You don't need to be spiritual or religious or woo-woo in order to use and activate the spirit level of learning and processing. And that is because the spirit level of learning and processing is about supporting your client to connect to a wisdom that is bigger and greater than their ego alone. It's about supporting a client to connect to a wisdom that's bigger and greater than their ego alone. Now, that can be God or spirit for sure, but it can also be about connecting to higher power or higher wisdom or intuition or earth energy or Buddha or your great grandmother or even Oprah, right? Or anyone that your client admires. So this is about tailoring the spirit language to what's gonna resonate for your client and using that concept of spirit, of something that is bigger than your client's ego or even mind alone, to tap into a bigger, higher wisdom. Right? So this is really about supporting your client to connect into a wisdom that they can trust, that they have faith in. So when you are working with a client towards a goal or changing a long-standing habit or pattern or moving beyond a fear or doing anything new or challenging, they need not only cognitive understanding, and not only heart connection, but they also need trust and faith in the topic that you're exploring, in the action steps that you're strategizing on, etc. So again, supporting your clients to connect in with and activate the spirit level of learning and processing isn't about being religious. It's about connecting into a wisdom in order for your client to cultivate trust and faith in the topic that you're exploring or strategizing on. And I'll just give a very abbreviated personal story about this. Some of you might know a couple of years ago, I did something very, very courageous. I took a sabbatical from working with private clients. I kept all of my group programs running, but I knew that I was needing more space in my life for myself, for my kids needed also a little bit more of me during that period of time. And it really made sense on paper for me to take a year off of working with clients one-on-one. I could see it. I could see all of the reasons why, but I wasn't convinced because it was really scary. It was scary to take a year off. It was scary to think about not having that income. It was scary to think, oh, will my clients feel like I'm letting them down? That being said, when I connected in with the idea of taking a sabbatical on the spirit level, and for me at the time, it was about connecting in with a higher wisdom and with kind of the feminine principle of spirit. I heard so clearly the following: giving yourself more space right now is key to your well-being and to the next level of your business growth. And that higher wisdom gave me so much more courage and inspiration to follow through, to take the sabbatical. And as it turned out, it was the best advice and wisdom I could ever get at that moment in my business. My business ended up doing even better that year, and I had more space. Okay, finally, you also want to activate the somatic or body level of learning and processing. The somatic level is all about the body. And when you activate the somatic level of learning and processing with a client, you help them become aware of things like, how do they feel in their body about a certain idea or a certain pattern or a certain situation? Activating the somatic level is about supporting clients to work through what they need to work through their bodies about a certain idea or pattern or fear or situation. It's about supporting clients maybe to make a body memory of a new way of being or acting or feeling, or to make a body memory of their next vision. Activating that somatic level of learning and processing can also support clients to work through fear. And if you go back to episode 1, I go a little bit more deeply into that. When a client is experiencing fear or resistance or self-sabotage, etc., you don't want to ignore that body level of learning and processing. You cannot befriend fear or navigate resistance through the mind only. And that's because something is happening viscerally in someone's body and with their nervous system when they are experiencing fear or when they're experiencing resistance or even self-sabotage. Connecting in with and activating that body level of learning and processing is also so helpful when a client is envisioning a new idea or has had a breakthrough of a new, let's say any kind of breakthrough, but for example, a breakthrough on a new belief that's going to be much more helpful for them. We want to take ideas, we want to take what comes up through that cognitive level of learning and processing and feel them in our bodies. When we can feel something in our body, and then when we can make a body memory of it, we are much more likely to come back to it. And when we come back to it, that's when we can more easily activate the idea again or the new pattern again, etc. Okay, so a couple of final thoughts on the 4 levels for now. Number 1, and this might be on your mind as we've been talking about this, and so I want to make sure I say this one first so that you don't have to worry. You don't necessarily need to activate all 4 of these levels of learning and processing in every conversation that you have with a client or in every group session. You want to think about over time, are you activating these 4 on the different topics that you are working on with your clients in your groups? In any given session, the balance of these 4 is going to look different, or on any given topic, the balance of these 4 is going to look different. Sometimes you're going to be working more on the cognitive level and less on the heart level. Sometimes you're going to be working much more on the body level and less on the spirit level, right? So every scenario has its own balance of these 4, and that has to do both with the topic at hand, the experiences, the beliefs, the fears, and the existing passion that a client might bring to it. And the balance also has to do with where a client is at on any given day, right? If a client, as I said earlier, if a client comes in already with a lot of emotion that is kind of overwhelming them, you're going to work less on the heart level. If a client comes in on a particular day and they've already mind mapped something out and they've written out all of the ideas and like they have all the things, you're going to work less on the cognitive level that day, right? That's taken care of. You might be wondering, okay, well, what are the skills to activate each of these 4 levels? I mentioned a number of them throughout our episode today, and really when you are masterful at your coaching and transformational skills, they're activating all four of these levels. So, in other words, when I teach practitioners and train practitioners in sacred depths, we learn how to craft questions that could activate any of these four levels. We learn how to create awareness through reflection in ways that could activate any of these four levels. We learn how to vision with clients in ways that can activate these four levels. We learn how to strategize in this way, etc. Right? So it's about going back to your skills and inserting the four levels into them. All right. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I hope that you got a lot of inspiration and motivation and new ideas. We kept it on the cognitive level today. So hopefully you're even taking down some notes and you've got a lot to think about. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would be so, so grateful if you left a review so that you could let others know how great it is. It will encourage them to want to listen, and it will be so helpful for me. So in advance, I appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.